they put together at that moment just resonated, and they started something. Because I was actually doing a talk, and it's interesting, you look at the subtitle, okay, Recipes and Reminiscences of a Family. Well, I came up with probably 10 subtitles of books done recently that are similar. I mean, everybody's picked up on that's what we need to do. We need to save those memories, and you know, it still makes as much sense as it did then, you know, with the 25th anniversary edition, and even today, it's still as relevant as always. And one of the things, I just said this to you, I talked to Norma Jean twice this week, and this made me call her. We hadn't talked since before the pandemic, and she said that one of the things that's really great is she doesn't remember some of the things that she wrote, and so it's you know, it's memorialized it just for her and her family and for her sister. So you know, it's as relevant as ever. And I was looking at just some of the books published this year that still pick up on what Norma Jean and Carol were doing all those years ago.
That's just so beautiful. And thinking about traditions, I have 2 children, and so actually writing down recipes, handwriting them in a book that they can then have is something that we're trying to do. But you've also talked a little bit about tradition and about culinary traditions and how to preserve those. So as the family historian for many families, what are some best practices that you would have for us to preserve tradition, to have that for ourselves and for others when we're no longer here?
Well, you know, oral tradition is wonderful. We know that it is, but we also know that something is lost. A lot is sometimes lost each time. And I'm fortunate enough that in 1988, I was somewhere in an airport, and I saw Better Homes and Gardens or some magazine like that, and saw a reference to a family cookbook. And I had never thought about, I mean, I had Norma Jean's book and all that, but I never really thought that I would do a family cookbook. And that gave me the idea, okay, do a family cookbook. And so that was 1988. We did it for my father's family in 1990. And so what we learned, of course, that when you give folks an assignment and give them a deadline, you know, what we thought, okay, we put out the call, say in June, and we thought that we'd give people till August and they'd get it in. We thought we would edit the book over Thanksgiving holiday, and then it'd be out by Christmas. I mean, we actually thought that. Anyway, in fact, the deadline came and went. We heard from one cousin in Canada. Thanksgiving, we had 30 recipes. But the problem was, you know, giving folks a deadline is one thing. When they have something that they just have to stop and, okay, give it to you. But when they don't have it, so we're talking things that have never been reduced to writing. So what we found out is we had to sit with the elders and get those recipes down. And my mother would say, you fill the sifter with flour and you use as much flour as you need. Now, how am I going to write that recipe? And so it kind of, with the first books we did, we kind of took the low-hanging fruit, or even the fruit that was already on the ground. We didn't do the difficult stuff. I have to tell you the story. So I've done several family cookbooks, but you have to get that stuff down and work to get it down. And as a result, we have, my mother was a wonderful cook, we have most of her recipes captured. But, so that's the moral story, is get that stuff down. But this was in 2002, and I've done 2 cookbooks by this, family cookbooks, and there's some recipes we just haven't gone the extra mile to get. So Louis Mahoney at that time was a food editor of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. So she put out a call. She wanted recipes to celebrate Mother's Day. She wanted people's memories of their mother's kitchens. So she didn't hear from any colored people. She only heard from white people. So she called me and said, you know, this cannot be, so I have to, can you write something? I said, I do not have time. I mean, I just was backed up with whatever. So I said, well, suppose that is it okay if you had somebody who has recollections of their grandmother's cooking? So of course she wanted the recollection. So my daughter, in about 20 minutes, wrote the most brilliant essay that went into the front page, the first page of the food section of the Times Dispatch. But we didn't have the recipe. You know, we just had never figured out. So a family cookbook we had just sent to the printer, and we said, we really got to just stop and get this recipe. So I sat with my mother. I filled the 4-cup sifter with flour. She used what she needed. I measured what was left. And she could tell by feel, now this is for pie crust, and she could tell by feel how much, so when she finished telling by feel, then again, so that's how we got the recipe. And so that didn't go into the Times Dispatch, but that went into the cookbook later. But you do have to do that. And it just sit with, I mean, of course now in this age, my husband has his own aunt, who's the most brilliant cook ever. So in contemporary times, and she died about 2 years ago, we were able to record the session. I mean, because you know, you do it on your cell phone. And so it became much easier than, you know, when they first sat with her, my husband's sister is trying to write while he, you know, they weren't recording, and so we have those recipes. And then, but sometimes you just didn't get them. I mean, as many as we didn't get my mother's recipe for baked tomatoes. So what I tried to do is, you know, Google is your friend. So I look up baked tomatoes, and what I see is like baked tomatoes, like stuffed peppers, baked stuffed peppers, like baked stuffed tomatoes, but not. So, you know, you didn't know what to do. Fast forward to, we went to, of course, the genealogy conference. We went to Charleston, to the National Genealogy Society, and my daughter's the foodie. She's not doing genealogy, she's around eating all these places. And she goes someplace for lunch, and she said, we've got to go back for dinner. So we go back, and there's something on the menu that says tomato pudding. So I said, you know, I'm gonna get something different. I'm not gonna get, I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna get it. Well, lo and behold, the tomato pudding was nothing but my mother's baked tomatoes. Wow. So that is how so once I know to call it tomato pudding, and of course it wasn't in the, I'm forgetting the name of the restaurant now, it wasn't in their cookbook, unfortunately. But once I know what to call it, then I Google it, there's tomato pudding everywhere. Even Mamie Eisenhower made tomato pudding. That's very much like my mother's. But anyway, so you just got to do that. You just have to use all the resources that are open to you. And we are just, my family, we've done, well, 2 family cookbooks and a church cookbook. And we've told the stories, because that's the thing about Spoonbread and Strawberry Wine, is they tell the stories. And it's just, I mean, you just sit here and you could, as you found out, but telling the story is that, you know, I always say that the recipes are, you know, the skeleton and all of the story you're telling, but when the anecdotes put the flesh on the bones. And so, just to do it, just to do it.
I hope you all wrote that down, because those are some really valuable insights. And you're right. So the book is 400 plus pages, and I learned about it recently, and I just started pouring into it because of the histories and the stories. There's stories in there that just resonated, even with the patriarch of the family arriving. No one at 14, but he was an expert blacksmith. No one knew how he came to be that way. Just the stories and the richness of the actual book. And this is going to be maybe a difficult question, I don't know, but we talked about recipes. Do you have a favorite and in this book? And if so, what is it and why?
Well, actually, this is funny. My favorite recipe in Spoonbread and Strawberry Wine is the spoonbread.
It's spoonbread.
And of all the years, I hadn't made it until, I mean, I've had the cookbook since it came out, and I have, you know, hundreds of other cookbooks, but I had never made it until my aunt had myasthenia gravis, which is disease that affects how your muscles can function, and she needed to eat pureed foods. I wanted her to have something, like we're going to do up the turkey, we're going to do up this, but I wanted her to have something that is served to her for Thanksgiving in the form it's supposed to be, so that hers is not this, Anyway, so that got me, and that's been less than 20 years ago, so that got me started on making Norman, and the crazy part about it is, I didn't even think to go to this book to look for it. I ran into that recipe when I Googled spoonbread, because my mother had a spoonbread recipe, but I wasn't, and we had that, but I wasn't fond of my mother's spoonbread. So I was looking for another recipe, but that's how I got started, and I love it. I love it. I've made some of the cobblers from here and other things, but I put a little bit sugar in the spoonbread. I make the exact recipe.
Hold up the book.
Yeah, the exact recipe, except I add a little bit of sugar. So I should have brought Bonnie, do you have the other book, the original?
The last time I saw that book, it was just frayed and yellowed and just crumpled.
Well, I should have brought a copy of it. It's
yeah,
it's
it may be in my garage somewhere.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.